Hello and welcome everyone to today's YouTube video, and we are going to cover the topic of probiotics and children. Now, we all want what's best for our kids, and it's easy to think that because a parent has benefited from a probiotic, that naturally their child will as well. It's also natural for people to think that we should buy a specific type of probiotic for infants, that it should be marketed as an infant probiotic. And we also think that because of how unmature an infant's microbiome is, that it makes sense that we should just give them probiotics and give them the best environment for the microbiome we could possibly give them. If you've listened to any of my previous YouTube videos or read any of my previous articles, I've done a lot of look into probiotics and into the mechanism of how they work, and to debunking some of the myths out there. One of which being that probiotics don't really colonize our gut. So to think that even an infant taking a probiotic is just going to colonize and just become a part of the ecosystem that is the microbiome isn't exactly what the data shows. And I still think if you're a parent and you're asking yourself, should my child take a probiotic? I think there's a couple bigger rocks you should address first. And it's the same big rocks that I would address with yourself, and those are you eating the most nutrient-dense, diverse diet that you can possibly eat? Are you moving in what's right for your body? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you providing yourself with enough stress management tactics? And do you feel as though you have a purpose in life? Now, for kids, the stress management tactics, hopefully they're not having to meditate yet as a 2-year-old, and hopefully a 2-year-old isn't having a crisis of purpose. So from a child's perspective, making sure that their sleep is in check, making sure that the foods you have introduced to them, they've been able to handle pretty well, and that making sure that your child is getting some sort of movement, is getting some sort of, whether it be tummy time or adequate walking. The mechanics of childhood movement is kind of outside my wheelhouse. But that brings me to say that making sure that their lifestyle is as dialed in as it can be, just how yours should be as dialed in as it can be before looking to take any sort of supplement. It turns out it may not be best practices for newborns to take probiotics. There's a very natural development of our microbiome, and congruently with our innate immune system that takes place the first 6 months of life. And taking a probiotic isn't a very natural way of our microbiome and our immune system to develop. I think a child is far better off being exposed to things they normally would, such as air, sun, the bacterial exchange by way of just different people, being exposed to different foods, and of course, being born hopefully via the vaginal canal, and then also being fed breast milk. And there's actually one study that I found that showed that in the group of infants taking probiotics, the parents reported a higher number of how frequent those newborns got sick. And that's led the authors to kind of speculate that maybe the probiotic was interfering with sort of that natural development of the immune system that takes place. Now here's to the good side, and that has shown some good benefit in the research, and that is colic. If anyone has ever dealt with a colicky baby, you know how frustrating and how wonderful it is once you finally get them to stop crying. There is some evidence in the literature that points to 3 weeks of a multi-strain probiotic led to a nearly 230% reduction in crying time for the infants taking a probiotic. 230%. If anyone out there is a parent, I'm not yet, but if anyone out there is a parent, you can understand that 230% less crying on a typical day for you could mean an extra nap, could mean you're able to get that workout in, you can finally meal prep. I mean, just imagine all the things you could get in with that much extra time. And also, these authors found that there was a nearly 50% improvement in quality of life in the families of infants taking probiotics. So it sounds like that those parents were taking advantage of all that extra time and probably able to get some much needed rest themselves. It's fairly easy to wrap our minds around the idea that probiotics can help with digestive conditions, and specifically constipation. There was a 2017, what's called a systematic review and meta-analysis, which is one of the highest standards in research, where they just group a bunch of studies together and try and come up with a effect that they've noticed from all of these studies put together. And they found that overall there was a tendency toward increase in stool frequency in children with constipation taking probiotics, aka the children that took the probiotics were able to poop more. Now, they did not notice a difference in stool consistency, which for those of you that haven't seen the Bristol stool chart before, I'll put it right there. And this is just a way of if the stool too hard or too soft. And the range of these studies in terms of how long the probiotics were taken was anywhere from 3 to 12 weeks. And to me, this highlights the importance that probiotics need to be taken over a sort of longer term basis because they have a sort of cumulative effect. Some of you may be familiar or have heard of the gut-joint connection. And there was one trial where they took children with what's called juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So many of you may have heard of rheumatoid arthritis. Typically happens in older individuals. This is specific to children. And they had these children take a probiotic, and unfortunately there was no difference in joint pain or any sort of objective outcomes like range of motion in the children taking the probiotics versus placebo. Now, that isn't to say that probiotics can't help with joint pain. In general, there's lots of evidence to show that probiotics can help with even conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis in the literature. All right, next up we have the gut-skin connection and the potential role probiotics could play there. And a 2018 systematic review and meta-analysis looked at the use of probiotics for the prevention of eczema in children. And unfortunately, the researchers found that the probiotics were no more effective than a placebo pill at preventing eczema. Now, that isn't to mean that probiotics can't help with any skin condition. There is good evidence that points that probiotics may be able to help support those with acne, but I wasn't able to find anything in children specifically. Also, that systematic review and meta-analysis only looked at one strain of a probiotic, a Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. So again, it's not that probiotics as a whole don't work for eczema, it's that this one strain of probiotic wasn't effective. So hopefully down the road there will be more studies like this looking at different strains or even multi-strain probiotic combinations. All right, lastly, we're going to discuss the idea of probiotics for headaches, and this addresses the gut-brain connection. And headaches affect anywhere from 10 to 40%, I know it's a wide range, of children. And there is good evidence that probiotics can help support those with migraines in adults. Now, there isn't any research on children and migraines yet, but here's kind of a caveat to this one. The reason that some of the researchers speculate probiotics could help with migraines is having to do with manipulations in the microbiome. Again, they don't colonize, but they have a way of kind of resetting the balance in the microbiome. Now, the human microbiome is pretty set, meaning it's what's there is probably there for a while by the time you hit age 3. So by the time you hit age 3, you have a similar microbiome to what you probably will when you're 40, aside from massive changes such as huge dietary swings or even taking antibiotics for a long time. So we can infer from that if a child's microbiome kind of looks like what it will as an adult, and probiotics work on migraines by working through the microbiome, we could infer, again, this is a guess here, that probiotics may be beneficial for children with migraines. Again, no clinical or evidence in the literature to back that up yet, just an inference, and it's something I'm looking forward to trying out in the clinic. When deciding if you want your child to take a probiotic, probably the number one thing you should first realize is there any safety concerns for giving that supplement to children. And as I previously mentioned, there is some evidence that giving probiotics to newborns really early in life may have an effect on the frequency at which they get sick. Now, I'm not saying probiotics cause sicknesses, it's just something to be aware for, and I think Mother Nature intended our microbiomes to develop in different ways aside from just taking a capsule. But some parents may want to add probiotics to a formula if for whatever reason that breastfeeding is not an option. And a 2015 systematic review found that adding probiotics to infant formula is completely safe for the use in healthy children. Now, what I would take from that is if you have a completely healthy baby and for whatever reason you're not able to breastfeed, then I see no reason or no harm in adding some probiotics to their formula. And if you do decide to experiment with your child with probiotics, I would pay really close attention to a change in bowel habits, because it's not uncommon for adults as a side effect of probiotics to experience a change in stool habits, whether it be from constipation and diarrhea or the opposite, or an upset stomach or bloating. So I would pay attention once you add in a supplement like probiotics to a child's diet and just see how the bowel movements change. And just to wrap things up here for you all, the healthiest microbiome is the microbiome that you have when you're healthy, and I think the same goes to your children. So if you dial in, again, their nutrition, their sleep habits, their learning capabilities, and their movement status, I think you're getting 99% of the way there. But if you want to tailor with that 1% and decide to throw in a probiotic, again, we've seen in the literature that it's good evidence for colic and constipation, not so much for eczema or joint conditions, and yet to be determined on migraines. So anyways, I hope you all found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to like it and leave a comment in the description box down below, and subscribe if you all want to see more content like this. As always, guys, trust in your gut.